The night was thick with humidity, the kind that clung to the skin and made the air feel heavy and stagnant. It was the fourth night of a sweltering summer, and despite the open windows, no breeze dared to enter. Lying on her bed in the second story of their home in suburban Ohio, Lily tossed and turned, unable to find solace in sleep. The fabric of her light summer dress stuck to her skin, and she felt restless. Deciding to quench her thirst, she slipped out of bed and padded down the stairs. As she reached the kitchen, the coolness of the water from the tap felt refreshing against her parched throat. Just then, she heard a soft rustling sound from the porch. Curiosity piqued, she stepped outside to find her father-in-law, David, gazing out into the garden, lost in thought. "Can't sleep either?" she asked, her voice breaking the stillness of the night. He turned to her, a faint smile crossing his lips. "It's just so hot tonight, isn't it? The bugs are particularly loud, too." Lily joined him on the porch, the soft glow of the porch light illuminating their faces. The bamboo plants in the garden swayed slightly, though there was no wind to speak of. The air felt thick and oppressive, almost as if it were holding its breath. David's voice trembled slightly as he spoke. "There was something I wanted to tell you that night." Her heart raced at his words, a mix of anticipation and fear coursing through her veins. "What was it?" she urged, her eyes locking onto his, searching for the truth behind his gaze. "I don't think your husband sees you as a woman," he confessed, his voice barely above a whisper. "I think he treats you like a child." Tears welled in her eyes as she felt the weight of his words. "I feel so lonely," she admitted, her voice cracking. "I want to be needed, to be seen as a woman." David's gaze softened, and he reached out, his hand trembling as it brushed against hers. "I feel the same way," he said, his voice low and earnest. In that moment, they both understood the gravity of their connection. She squeezed his hand, and for a fleeting moment, their shadows merged in the dim light. The bamboo rustled again, though there was no breeze. "Come with me," David said suddenly, standing up and taking her hand. She followed him, her heart pounding as they walked toward his room, the sound of their footsteps echoing in the quiet house. They paused outside the door, facing each other. "Are you sure about this?" he asked, his voice hoarse. She nodded, unable to find the words. The door creaked open, revealing a soft glow from within. The light spilled out, casting elongated shadows on the floor. As she stepped inside, the door closed behind them with a gentle click. Outside, the wind suddenly picked up, rustling the leaves of the trees in the garden. The moon peeked through the clouds, illuminating the room in a soft, ethereal light. Inside, the atmosphere was charged with an unspoken tension. Time seemed to stretch, and all that could be heard was the sound of their breaths, mingling in the stillness. They were caught in a moment that felt both right and wrong, their hearts racing in unison. After what felt like an eternity, the world outside fell silent. Lily glanced at David, who sat beside her, both of them lost in their thoughts. "Was this the right thing to do?" he murmured, breaking the silence. She didn't have an answer. A mix of guilt and fulfillment churned within her, leaving her feeling both alive and conflicted. They both knew this wasn't the end, it was merely the beginning of something deeper. "I should go," she finally said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Lily," David's voice was thick with emotion. "I'm sorry." Without another word, she slipped out of the room, her heart racing as she walked down the hallway. Each step felt heavy, the weight of what had just transpired pressing down on her. She climbed the stairs back to her room, collapsing onto her bed, her mind racing with thoughts of what had just happened. The next morning, she awoke feeling a strange heaviness in her body. Yet, there was also a lightness in her heart, a sense of liberation. As she descended the stairs, she found David in the kitchen, preparing breakfast as if nothing had changed. "Good morning," he greeted her, his tone casual, but there was an underlying tension in the air. "Good morning," she replied, both of them avoiding the elephant in the room. The atmosphere was charged with a secret, a shared understanding that altered the dynamics of their relationship. Later that afternoon, her husband, Mark, called to say he would be delayed returning home from his trip. "I'll be back next weekend," he said cheerfully. "How's everything at home?" "Everything's fine," she replied, her heart racing as she hung up the phone. It wasn't guilt she felt, it was anticipation. That night, drawn by an invisible force, she found herself at David's door once again. "Come in," he said, his voice steady, as if he had been expecting her. Inside, the room felt different, charged with a new energy. "I've been waiting for you," he admitted, his eyes reflecting a newfound determination. From that day forward, their lives took on a duality. By day, they maintained the facade of normalcy, tending to the garden, running errands, and greeting neighbors. But by night, they were drawn to each other, unable to resist the pull of their connection. On the third night, David spoke softly, "It's been years since I've felt this alive." "I feel the same," she confessed, though tears glistened in his eyes. "But this is wrong." "I know," she replied, squeezing his hand tightly. "But I don't want to think about that right now." Then came the fifth night, and everything changed. They were in David's room when they heard the unmistakable sound of the front door opening. "Surprise! I'm home early." Mark's voice echoed through the house, sending a chill down Lily's spine. Panic surged through her, and she scrambled to her feet, her heart racing. "I need to hide," she whispered urgently. "Quick, go out the back," David urged, his voice low and frantic. Lily adjusted her dress, her hands shaking as she slipped out into the garden, the summer night air cool against her skin. She darted behind a cluster of bushes, her breath quickening as she heard Mark's footsteps approaching. "Dad, are you awake?" Mark called out, his voice growing closer. Lily held her breath, her heart pounding in her chest. She could hear the door to David's room creak open, and she strained to listen. "Hey, you're back early," David replied, his voice steady, but she could hear the tension beneath it. "Yeah, I thought I'd surprise you," Mark said, his footsteps moving closer. "Where's Lily?" She felt a wave of panic wash over her. David's voice was calm, but she could sense the unease. "She's probably upstairs. I think she was feeling a bit under the weather." "Okay, I'll check on her," Mark said, and Lily's heart sank. She remained hidden, her mind racing as she heard Mark's footsteps retreating. She could feel David's presence nearby, and she turned to see him standing at the edge of the garden, concern etched on his face. "Are you okay?" he whispered, reaching out to her. "I don't know," she replied, her voice trembling. "What if he finds out?" David's eyes were filled with a mix of fear and determination. "We have to be careful. We can't let him know." With a nod, she took his hand, feeling the warmth of his touch. Together, they slipped back into the house, the weight of their secret hanging heavily in the air. Lily's heart raced as she stood in the dimly lit room, her thoughts swirling. "What's wrong?" "You look pale," David said, concern etched on his face. "I'm just a little surprised." "Sorry, I didn't mean to startle you," she replied, her voice barely above a whisper. David reached out to embrace her, but she froze for a moment, memories of another man's touch still fresh in her mind. "Maybe we should get some rest," he suggested gently, sensing her unease. "Yeah, I think that's a good idea," she said, lying down beside him. Despite the comfort of the soft sheets, sleep eluded her. David quickly fell into a steady rhythm of breathing, while she stared at the ceiling, replaying the events of the night in her mind. She had never felt such a mix of emotions before. The thrill of being with David was intoxicating, yet guilt gnawed at her insides. She knew that in just a few days, he would be leaving for a business trip, and she would find herself back in that other man's arms. They had crossed a line that couldn't be uncrossed. 3 days later, David prepared for his trip. "I might be gone for 2 weeks this time," he said casually, but Lily felt a knot tighten in her stomach. "Yeah, I understand," she replied, trying to keep her voice steady. She couldn't shake the feeling that she was living a double life. David had no idea what was happening behind his back, and the thought of it made her heart ache. That evening, as she approached the door to the guest room where she often met Mark, she hesitated. The house was quiet, and she could hear nothing from inside. When she finally opened the door, Mark was sitting there, his expression serious. "Lily, please sit down," he said, motioning to the chair across from him. A sense of dread washed over her as she took a seat. "Is everything okay?" she asked, her voice trembling slightly. "I need to talk to you about something important," Mark said, his voice steady but with an underlying tremor. "I've been feeling like something isn't right between us." Lily's heart raced. She had been so careful, but now it felt like everything was unraveling. "What do you mean?" she asked, trying to keep her tone neutral. I can't shake the feeling that you're hiding something from me," he confessed, his eyes searching hers for answers. Panic surged through her. "I'm not hiding anything," she insisted, but the words felt hollow. Mark leaned forward, his voice dropping to a whisper. "I need you to be honest with me. Are you seeing someone else?" "I'm not," she replied, but the lie felt heavy on her tongue. He studied her for a moment, and she could see the conflict in his eyes. "I want to believe you, but I can't help but worry. You've been distant lately." "I'm just stressed with everything going on," she said, hoping to deflect his suspicions. Mark nodded slowly, but she could tell he wasn't convinced. "Okay, but I need you to promise me that if there's something going on, you'll tell me." "I promise," she said, though she knew the promise was a lie. As the days passed, the tension between them grew. David returned from his trip, and they fell back into a routine, but the shadow of her secret loomed over her. She could see the love in his eyes, and it made her heart ache even more. One evening, as they sat together on the couch, David turned to her. "You know, I've been thinking about starting a family," he said, his voice full of hope. Lily's heart sank. "Really?" she asked, trying to mask her panic. "Yeah, I think it's time we consider it." "I want to have kids with you," he said, a smile spreading across his face. "Of course," she replied, her voice shaky. Inside, she felt like she was drowning. Days turned into weeks, and Lily found herself visiting Mark more frequently, each encounter more charged than the last. They would talk for hours, sharing secrets and laughter, but the underlying tension was always there. One night, as they sat together in the dim light of his room, Mark reached out and took her hand. "I can't stop thinking about you," he confessed, his voice low and intense. Lily's breath caught in her throat. "Mark, we can't," she started, but he leaned closer, his gaze piercing into hers. "I know it's wrong, but I can't help it," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. Before she could respond, he closed the distance between them, and their lips met in a tentative kiss. It was electrifying, and for a moment, she forgot everything else. But as reality crashed back in, she pulled away, her heart racing. "We can't do this," she said, her voice trembling. "Why not?" he asked, frustration evident in his tone. "Because it's complicated," she replied, tears welling in her eyes. "Complicated or not, I can't stop thinking about you, he said, his voice softening. Lily felt torn, the weight of her choices pressing down on her. She knew she had to make a decision, but the thought of losing either man was unbearable. As the weeks went by, the situation only grew more complicated. David was planning a future with her, while Mark was pulling her deeper into a world of passion and secrecy. One evening, as she sat alone in her room, she felt a wave of nausea wash over her. It had been happening more frequently, and she couldn't ignore it any longer. The next day, she found herself sitting in a doctor's office, her heart pounding. "Miss, you're pregnant," the doctor said, and her world shattered. "Pregnant?" she echoed, her mind racing. "Yes, about 6 weeks along," the doctor confirmed. The realization hit her like a freight train. She thought back to the nights spent with both men, the moments that had led her to this point. As she walked out of the office, the weight of her situation settled heavily on her shoulders. She had to face the truth, but the truth was a tangled mess of emotions and choices. When she returned home, David was waiting for her. "Hey, how was your day?" he asked, a smile on his face. "Long," she replied, her voice barely above a whisper. He noticed her demeanor immediately. "Are you okay?" "Yeah, just tired," she said, forcing a smile. But inside, she was anything but okay. She had to figure out how to navigate this new reality, and the thought of telling either man filled her with dread. Days turned into a blur as she tried to come to terms with her pregnancy. David continued to talk about their future, while Mark's intensity only grew. One evening, as she sat with David, he turned to her with a serious expression. "I've been thinking, maybe we should start planning for a baby," he said, his eyes shining with excitement. Lily's heart raced. "Yeah, maybe," she said, her voice shaky. But inside, she felt like she was falling apart. How could she bring a child into this world when she didn't even know who the father was? As the days passed, she found herself visiting Mark again, needing to confront the reality of her feelings. "Lily, I can't stop thinking about you," he confessed, his eyes dark with longing. "I know," she replied, her heart aching. "Then why are we pretending?" he asked, frustration evident in his tone. "Because it's complicated," she said, tears welling in her eyes. "Complicated or not, I want you," he said, stepping closer. Lily felt her resolve crumbling. "Mark, we can't." But before she could finish, he kissed her again, and she melted into him, the world around them fading away. They spent the night together, lost in each other, but as dawn broke, reality came crashing back. Lily knew she had to make a choice, but the thought of losing either man felt impossible. As she sat alone in her room, she felt the weight of her decisions pressing down on her. She had to confront the truth, but the truth was a tangled web of emotions and choices. In the end, she knew she had to face the consequences of her actions, but the path ahead felt uncertain. The love she felt for both men was real, but so were the lies that had brought her to this moment. And as she prepared to confront her future, she knew that whatever happened next would change everything. Lily stood on the edge of the pier, the salty breeze tousling her hair as she gazed out at the shimmering waters of Lake Michigan. The sun was setting, casting a golden hue over the waves, but her heart felt heavy with uncertainty. She took a deep breath, trying to steady herself. "I'm pregnant," she finally managed to say, her voice trembling. Her father-in-law, Tom, looked at her in shock, his face paling as he processed her words. "What do you mean, pregnant?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Tears streamed down Lily's cheeks. "It could be yours, or it could be Mark's," she confessed, her heart racing as she recalled the tangled web of emotions that had led her to this moment. Tom sank into a nearby chair, his expression a mix of disbelief and sorrow. "This is complicated, he murmured, staring blankly at the ground. It had been 6 weeks since Mark had returned from his deployment, and the weight of their unspoken feelings had hung heavily in the air since then. "What should I do?" Lily asked, her voice cracking as she looked at him, desperate for guidance. "I don't know," Tom replied, shaking his head slowly. "This child, it deserves a happy family. But if it's mine, how will we ever know?" Lily felt a wave of guilt wash over her. "I didn't mean for this to happen," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I just wanted to feel loved again." Tom stood up, his eyes glistening with unshed tears. "Lily, please. If this child is mine, I want you to raise it with Mark. Just promise me you won't tell anyone. This child deserves a normal life, free from secrets." Lily nodded, her heart aching at the thought of losing Tom. "I love you, Tom. I always will," she said, stepping forward to embrace him. He held her tightly, and she could feel the warmth of his body against hers, a bittersweet reminder of the love they shared. As she left the nursing home, she glanced back at Tom, who stood by the window, watching her go. They didn't wave goodbye, their eyes met in a silent farewell that spoke volumes. It felt like the end of an era. On the train ride back to Chicago, Lily placed her hand on her belly, feeling the weight of her choices. "This baby is Mark's," she whispered to herself, trying to convince her heart. The memories of their nights together flooded her mind, the passion and the connection that had ignited between them. But the thought of Tom lingered, a shadow that wouldn't fade. 8 months passed, and Lily's belly grew round and full. Mark was overjoyed, his excitement palpable as he talked to their unborn child every night. "You're going to be amazing," he'd say, his hands gently resting on her stomach. Each time, a pang of guilt shot through Lily, knowing that Tom's heart was also intertwined in this little life. She hadn't seen Tom since that day at the nursing home. Mark would occasionally visit him alone, telling Lily how happy Tom was about the baby. "He can't wait to be a grandfather," Mark would say, and Lily would smile, though her heart felt heavy with the truth. Then, one winter morning, the contractions began. "Lily, are you okay?" Mark asked, panic in his voice as he rushed her to the hospital. The pain was intense, memories flooding back, moonlit nights, the warmth of Tom's embrace, and the bittersweet farewell at the shore. "You're almost there," the nurse encouraged, her voice steady and calm. "Just a little more." With one final push, the room filled with the sound of a baby's cry. "It's a boy," the nurse announced, and Mark's eyes filled with tears of joy. "We did it, Lily. We have a son." Lily held the tiny bundle against her chest, feeling the warmth and softness of the baby's skin. "He's perfect," she whispered, tears streaming down her face. "Thank you, Mark." "Are you okay?" the nurse asked, concern etched on her face. "Yes," Lily replied, her heart swelling with love. But beneath that joy was a flicker of fear. What would happen when their son grew up? Would he ever know the truth about his father? "Let's go see Tom," Mark said, his excitement bubbling over. "He'll want to meet his grandson." As they approached the nursing home, Lily's heart raced. "Are you ready?" Mark asked, opening the door. "Yeah," she breathed, trying to steady herself. They walked to Tom's room, and as Mark opened the door, Tom looked up, his eyes widening in disbelief. "Lily, is that," he began, his voice trailing off as he took in the sight of the baby. "Dad, this is our son," Mark said proudly, holding the baby out for Tom to see. Tom stepped closer, his expression softening as he gazed at the tiny face. "He's beautiful," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "What's his name?" "Cody," Lily replied, her heart aching at the thought of the name's significance. "He was born by the lake." Tom nodded, his eyes glistening with tears. Cody, that's a good name. Do you want to hold him? Mark asked, and Tom hesitated for a moment before nodding, his hands trembling as he cradled the baby. Hey there, little guy, Tom whispered, his voice breaking. You're going to grow up strong and happy. Lily watched the two of them, her heart swelling with a mixture of love and sorrow. She knew this moment was bittersweet, a culmination of all the choices she had made. As Tom looked up at her, their eyes met, and she felt an unspoken understanding pass between them. Days turned into weeks, and Lily found herself at the beach, holding Cody close as the waves lapped at the shore. Your father is out there somewhere, she whispered, looking out at the horizon. But you are my everything. Cody cooed softly, blissfully unaware of the complexities of his origins. The sun dipped low in the sky, casting a warm glow over the water, and Lily felt a sense of peace wash over her. No matter the secrets they carried, the love she felt for her son was pure and unwavering. As the years passed, Cody grew into a lively child, full of laughter and joy. Mark was a devoted father, always there to play and support him. Tom remained in the nursing home, and while Lily visited him occasionally, she knew their paths had diverged for a reason. One day, as she tucked Cody into bed, he looked up at her with wide eyes. Mom, can we go to the beach tomorrow? Of course, sweetheart, she replied, smiling. As they walked hand in hand toward the shore, the sound of the waves filled the air. The sun was setting, painting the sky in hues of orange and pink. Lily felt a sense of contentment wash over her. Look, Mom. The water is beautiful. Cody exclaimed, running ahead. Yes, it is, she said softly, watching him play. In that moment, she realized that life was not about the secrets they held but about the love they shared. And as the waves crashed against the shore, she knew that no matter what the future held, she would always protect her son and cherish the life they had built together. Subscribe to the channel,